to play you something very, very quickly. It is Dr. Abdullah Karam, the head of all of KHDA, and he is speaking at the World Summit on Education. And I say speaking, but if you listen carefully, he's singing as well.
A good friend of mine who's a brain scientist always tell me to find new questions. Start asking new questions for you to find the unknown answer somewhere. That is very good for you because it makes you curious, makes you very positive and energetic. Fun.
Now, I'm certain you didn't hear any singing. I'm certain you didn't. The way your brain perceives the rise and fall of my voice is interfering with the way your brain deals with perceiving words. Music and language are nested together in the brain in incredibly tight ways that are so surprisingly uniform. It is actually amazing that every person you meet that can speak well and read well and write well and converse well isn't musical. But we don't mirror the same experiences that actually launch it. So what I did, I took a tiny bit of his speech and I looped it. If I continue, you will hear music emerge that was there all the time. But first, you have to allow yourself to get past the words. So, bad click. Sorry, bad click.
A good friend because it makes you curious, makes you very positive and energetic.
I took a slice of it and I looped it. It'll very quickly turn into music. Bum, 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 bing, bing, bum. It's like a bass line. Fine. Sing along. Sing along. New questions. Fine. New questions. Now, if I go back to the beginning of his speech, the exact thing you just heard a moment ago, now it'll sound like in the middle of his speech to the World Summit on Education, he breaks into song. Oh, goodness. Sorry, bad click again. It'll sound like he breaks into song.
A good friend of mine who's a brain scientist always tell me to find new questions. Start asking new questions.
It literally sounds like Dr. Abdullah Karam talking at the World Summit on Education, breaks into song for a moment and then goes back to speaking. The music is always there. The processes of making music, the processors that allow someone to and the processor that allows me to talk are identical. It's just that if you picture it like the little grabber claw from those games that reaches in and grabs the little, and drops, my claw is now grabbing words again out of the word closet. It's no longer grabbing tone patterns or rhythm patterns. And it looks like, even though the processors are the same, when you are perceiving music that is married to words, in other words, whole songs, the mind actually cannot handle that. But because your brain can switch back and forth between tasks very, very rapidly, we learn a favorite song and it feels like one thing, but the mind has either learned the tone patterns or the words separately, and your perception of it is a gestalt. In other words, in the head, it's very fragmented. And we already know this. We put adults under EEG and PET scanners, and they do music, and a lot of different areas of the brain light up, showing that, in a sense, music in the mind is very fragmented. You've got your executive function that lets you feel like that you're not schizophrenic. So you don't feel the fragmentation of it. You feel it like at a gestalt. You feel like music is one thing, and it is different. What I wanted to show you just with that is there's music going on literally right now that you simply cannot perceive. It's literally impossible to perceive it because your processor can handle tone patterns or words. It cannot handle a tune. A melody with words is too complex for the brain as one thing. What? Little children sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Sure they do, but have you heard them? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. They're all over the place while they're concentrating on the words. Anyway, okay, so I gotta go very quickly if I'm gonna try to do this in under 10 minutes. I'm gonna zap through this very, very rapidly. Basically, if we begin to mirror the sequence of language learning with the sequences of music learning, if we twin them, you'll have every capable adult that can speak, read, and write be just as musical. Kids will sing and play more easily. They'll have mental readiness. We only ever seem to talk about physical readiness. Is her hand big enough for the violin? Is she have the strength in her lips to play the trumpet? But there's a set of mental readinesses that ought to be in place before a kid tries to play an instrument. Otherwise, most kids end up quitting and citing boredom, which is incredibly important that that's what they cite. They don't cite frustration, they cite boredom. Most people don't listen to music intelligently. Most people listen to music the way I would listen to you speak French, with no intelligence but wrapped by the sound. The language of Arabic captures my ear. I grew up in Florida, but my neighbors were Lebanese. So I would go over and I would listen to Abdul Halim Hafez and Kulthum and all these wonderful Arabic musicians, and I would listen to them speaking in Arabic, and the breathiness and the beauty of the Arabic language caught my ear, even though I had no idea what was being said. Most people listen to music the same way, surface only. Notation is not supposed to be muscle instructions. Musical notes, when you read them, are not supposed to tell your fingers where to go. Notation is supposed to do exactly in the mind what words do in the mind. You look at some squiggles, they talk inside your head, and you comprehend. That's reading. You're supposed to look at some squiggles in music notation, they sing inside your head, and you comprehend. That would be reading. If you choose to take the sounds that the notation is producing and make it come out your fingers on a guitar or on a piano, that's different. But the notation was never supposed to tell you where to put your fingers. Notation is not muscle instructions, but unfortunately gets taught that way. Higher order skills, improvising, harmonizing, transcribing. These are collegiate level, university level skills that I've got going on with my year fours now, and they really can do it. Independence begins in language when you own enough words that the words that you know can provide a provisional definition for the words you don't yet know. A word comes along that you're unfamiliar with, but it's surrounded by the ones you do know. Your mind says, it must mean something like this. And you get a provisional definition and you move on. And over time, if that word keeps showing up, your mind refines the definition without you ever looking up. In music, the twin to that is the musical version of synonyms. We now know what the musical version of synonyms is, and if you own the musical version of synonyms, your mind has 4 or 5 patterns of a certain type, comes along and the brain says, I know where to slot you in. I know what you're like. I know what you're different from. I know what to do with you. We now know how to get kids to that tier. It doesn't happen instantly. It's about in traditional teaching, if you see them once a week, it can be done in under 3 years, while still doing all the other stuff like preparing the concerts and getting ready for things. Everyone can. Music truly is skill building, not talent. But of course, talent is what this is supposed to represent. Talent is latent in just about everybody you know because we don't traditionally do the skills in the right sequence. The right sequence is exactly the same for music and language. I'm going to go through this very fast. I'm going to treat it like a language exercise, but it's primarily the same in music. You listened. A bunch of experts spoke to you in a variety of subjects. You were a baby. You were a lump of meat just absorbing the syntax and the sounds. Syntax is the orderly arrangement of sounds. In Spanish, we put the adjective after the noun. It's not the blue house. In Spanish, it's the house blue. There's an orderly arrangement in all languages. That's syntax. There's an orderly arrangement in music. What you didn't get in early childhood is mom or dad and your big brother singing directly to you in a rich variety. One day it's da dum dum dee dee da dum, da dum dum da da dee dee dee. Tomorrow it's dee da dee da dee da dee dum dee da 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 dee. But children get a rich variety of language spoken to them. Moms narrate their day sometimes, frustrated with the husband. Honey, mommy's going to go and do a little workout. You're going to sit there. Mommy's going to work out because daddy's so frustrated. Mommy has to work out or mommy's going to kill daddy. And the baby's hearing this and absorbing. That was a joke, but you know what I mean. We narrate our entire day for a child. The amount of input they get is so rich and so varied. Not the same in music, but if it was, watch out. Next thing that happens is children begin to explore. The ear has been fed. The mind is beginning to wake up. The child begins to babble. By about 4 months old, we know that we can tell the child has been listening to Chinese because the babble sounds Chinese. The babble sounds French. The babble sounds Arabic. The babble sounds Urdu. The babble sounds English. The babble sounds Italian. It's still nonsense, but we encourage it. As a matter of fact, this is where the experts begin to imitate the child. The child goes, And the experts of language don't go, well, that was just rubbish, child. We go, we validate their explorations. We do precisely the opposite in music. We try to correct everything. We try to get it right far too soon. All of that babbling leads children to start thinking in the language. They prove this non-verbally. Children know how to think in music before they can prove it verbally with their voices. One of the things I do with all my students is there's a tune that goes, dee da da dum, dee da da dum, yada dee da dee da dee dum, dee da dee dum. And I leave off the last note. And I wait for their heads to cock to the side. And none of yours did, which means none of you knew I wasn't finished. Did you know? As a musician, would you have finished that? She would have da da dee da dee da dee dum, dee da da da. Next is one note, just one note to finish it, like a keynote. Yada dee da dee da dee dum, dee da dee dum. And it would be dum. Yeah. Kids begin to think, but what they'll do first is when I drop a note from an unfamiliar, it has to be unfamiliar, when I drop a pitch off of an unfamiliar melody, I know they're starting to wake up and think like musicians because their head pops to the side. They're like, why did you leave that out? Kids prove this in language because you can ask a small child, honey, go get daddy's blue book. Child hasn't spoken yet, hasn't read yet, hasn't written yet, and they toddle off and they come back carrying the red book. No, honey, the blue book. They're proving that all of that listening world has engendered a kind of thinking that they can't yet prove it here. The next step is what makes singing teachers angry at me. We teach ourselves to speak. The complexity of my tongue and my jaw and my lips and my diaphragmatic intercostal muscles, it's an incredibly sophisticated process. It does not need to be taught at all. Children teach it to themselves. What they're really trying to do is take the sounds that are now in their head and try to produce them with this musculature. Does it come out accurately at first? Of course not. But we keep surrounding them with correctness, and they make the corrections for themselves. My son's first word was gah, gah, gah. For 2 weeks, we thought suddenly we had given birth to a bird. And gah, gah. Until finally, we were holding him on the balcony one day, and it's as if he was trying to say, you silly people, gah. And of course, he was saying car. Over time, of course, he did fix the pronunciation. Children will fix their own intonation in singing. Children will teach themselves, fundamentally teach themselves to sing. As a matter of fact, because I'm about to run out of time, if you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt this, and I want to show you something. I'm a drummer. I do not teach singing. I do not sing in tune, as you just heard. Horizon School has 2 year 6 classes of 20 and 3 year 5 classes of 20. We draw from that very small cohort a choir each year. You're about to see a part of a rehearsal for that choir that was missing some 15 kids. Essentially, you're talking about 50% of the student body is singing at this standard, and I don't know how to teach singing. You don't have to teach singing. Rhythmically, listen to some of the harmonies in just a moment. Particularly here. That's actually, believe it or not, not the one I intended to show you. The one I intended to show you was, where's the weep no more? Yeah, this. I'm talking over them. There's probably 10 kids missing from this, but listen to the quality of the singing. They're in tune, they're in time. I'm barely doing anything. As a matter of fact, I go running off and run back in a moment. I was out of tune. I actually have to run off to turn the recording down that was put on that's too loud. And forgive me, you'll see me run back in a moment because I have to conduct an entrance that's very important to me. They're singing, shed no tear, the flower will bloom another year. Hear the distance? They sing in tune, in time, quite beautifully, and I didn't teach it. I did not teach one moment of ha 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 and everything the traditional singing teachers do. I've done literally zero of it in my time at Horizon School, and that's because ultimately what they're really doing is making their musical muscles mirror their thoughts. We've fixed the thinking. I can't speak, I can't produce Urdu, not because there's anything wrong with my throat, because I can't think Urdu. I can't produce Russian because I can't think Russian. When people say they don't have a singing voice, it is complete nonsense. What they lack is a tone thinker. They don't hear tones in their brain very clearly. And I made sure I wrote, making musical muscles mirror thoughts. The ear, the mind, the mouth are made for language. They're made for music. The fingers are not. This is an add-on. We will never teach children to type and text before they speak and think and converse on their own. We try to teach children to type and text on instruments before they can think and speak music, and it's doomed to a kind of long-term slow failure. Next step, they constructed language bit by bit. Mama go, daddy leave. These are not sentences they ever would have heard, but they're sentences small children begin to produce. This is improvisation. This is now taking what you know and creating with it. We skip improvisation almost entirely in music education when it should be a step that certainly precedes reading and writing and certainly should precede instruments. And when you do it that way, what the next step is what children did. They expanded their vocabulary. And they did it mostly through improvisation. You have a conversation with the child. The child is learning your words, they're learning your syntax, they're making all sorts of errors, but you're not correcting them in any way, shape, or form. They're just simply hearing correctness. And over time, they speak more capably. They create more capable sentences. And so this process is about a 3-year thing in language before they begin to read and write. And of course, what reading and writing really is simply gluing a picture to information you already understood. That's how reading starts. Reading is not an alphabetic process. It shouldn't be an alphabetic process in music either. It's not EGBDF, it's not FACE. Children are hearing the story for the 50th time, and on that log there was a great green, and the child says, frog. They use the whole word. They never ask, Mommy, what's the R mean in frog? Children know that the whole thing is the unit of meaning. Reading is not alphabetical. It shouldn't be in music. And the last thing you do is you start to teach yourself how to make your non-musical muscles mirror your thoughts. You better have pretty clear thoughts if you're going to send them to an area of the body not meant for language or music. Fingers are not meant for language or music. Even deaf people from birth, when they're signing, are using their auditory areas of their brain. My hand jerking around like this because I'm Italian while I talk. It's on its own. It's its own little autopilot. And the greatest musicians will tell you they have no idea what their hands are doing when they play because they're just busy singing in their head. Anyway, that's less than I wanted to show you, but if I skip over something, this is the why of it all. This is comparing music to language, music to language. I want to at least prove to you that what I said a moment ago is true about reading, because most of us try to teach music reading as EGBDF, FACE. Words are alphabetic, that's true, but reading in music and language is not. So you can read this, right? Please do it out loud. It's almost impossible to. But research shows it almost doesn't matter in what order the letters appear. This is because reading is not done letter by letter, but as patterns in context. Reading music is also based on patterns in context. Just as we do not truly read letter by letter, we also shouldn't be reading note by note. My students would see one pattern there and one pattern there, one pattern there, one pattern there. My students can read this. I got year 5s that can without an instrument. Without an instrument. And by the way, if you truly read letter by letter, try it. You'll say ist, asamopult, ism, supilbit. Try that. Try to read what's really there. It's difficult and it's nonsense. when a child is doing EGBDF, FACE reading, unless that child was born with an unbelievably high aptitude for tone thinking, she's so busy on the next set of muscle instructions, she's living a tiny slice. She's not living a musical experience, which connects the sounds you're making with the sounds you heard, with the sounds that are coming, the way when you're watching a movie, yes, you're watching 1 millisecond at a time, but your mind connects to what's past and makes predictions about what's coming in the future. Forgive me, I have no idea what I'm doing to your microphone by diving it around like that. But the child is so busy because attention is unitary, unless she has an unbelievable ear. I wasn't born with one. They end up citing boredom. Mom's downstairs having a musical experience because mom is putting together what she just heard with what she's hearing with what might come next. The child is living slice, 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 slice. And so the child says, oh, mom, I want to quit, I'm bored. She's not actually having a musical experience. She's having a physical one. And I think we do that to them when we try to teach them to read the way you certainly wouldn't want to read. Ist asumable ism supilba to bulvaya tahat yaul cloud, you know what I mean? It's sooner or later, the brain just says, give me something meaningful. And tiny little slices of music aren't meaningful to the kid. So she quits her piano lessons, but she does not quit music. To me, that's the dead giveaway. She doesn't go smash her iPod on the same day. She doesn't tell mom to keep the radio off. She goes back to where she should have been in the first place, which is really, if I go way back, and I'll stop right here, which is really in this area. She was a listener, absorber, explorer, beginner thinker, and maybe a speaker. Maybe on her own she could sing some of that Adele song. I don't believe when you're singing along that you are singing. I treat that to me as listening out loud. That's a different animal. That's the musical equivalent of typing paper. Do you know what I mean? You can say the words I'm saying as they come out of my mouth. Please start saying the exact words that I'm saying. Somebody has to do it and they'll all join in. Just say the words that I'm saying as they come out of my mouth. Okay, you're the only one brave enough. This is what we're doing when we sing along. To me, that's just listening out loud. That's not even singing. But so this is where she was, and this is what she goes back to, because this is what her brain was engaged in. This is what we were trying to make her do. She didn't have the readiness for it. It shows up. It takes 2 or 3 years of lessons before it finally shows up, which is terrible for your wallet. I didn't get to sort of do the flip side of how we begin to solve these problems. But the solution is follow the ideal language learning sequence with music, follow its time frames, spend a lot of time as a listener, absorber, explorer. Let them create nonsense. Encourage their nonsense. Surround their nonsense with sense. The child says, akakasatapa. The mama says, akasatakata is my favorite new word. You reinforce what the kid did, but you also surround it with something richer. They'll start proving they can think in the language. The 2 languages of music, tone and rhythm, ultimately. Tone, you can prove they can think with tone by leaving off notes. Dee-dum-dum, dee-la-dee-da-dum. Dee-dum-dum, da-la-dee-dee-dee. Da-ya-da-dee-la-dee-da-dum. Da-da-da-dee-dee-dee. And the kid will start going, She'll hum that one missing note that she's never heard before, proving she can think it. And we get the time frames wrong, we get the sequence wrong, we get the emphasis wrong, and then we put them out in public and make them bark. And so it doesn't surprise me that we're not yet where 2071 might be with music and language mirroring each other. You mirror it, and it's going to work. And I have to leave it there because I see this guy looking through the window a bunch of times. We're supposed to start at 10:15, and I was supposed to stop at 11. Please grab me outside if you want to ask me any questions about it. But and I will send you the rest of the presentation if you like, and other stuff if you're interested. Track me down. It's working at Horizon. I've stayed there for the last 10 years largely because they've sort of let me not teach the British National Curriculum, not teach the American Band Program, not teach the primary, middle years, and diploma program of IB. I've taught all these. I've taught them with energy, with enthusiasm, with passion, with deep lesson planning, with making it fun for kids. None of them actually make kids into musicians. This does, because it matches how the brain actually works. Thanks.